Okay, so we have a look here at First Solar. I'm looking at an intermediate time frame outlook, and we're going to use the askSlim methodology to be able to answer the core trade planning questions. And that first question, which is extremely important, is defining what your outlook period is. And as I mentioned, we're looking at a intermediate time frame, and I have the weekly and the daily charts up here to help me prepare my sum of the evidence. So this is a bullish bias that I have alongside strategy outlook. And so why is that? So we're going to start over here on the weekly chart. And what we have here is there was a low, intermediate low that formed in early February. And then we had a very explosive, a massive rising phase that occurred actually taking out, you can see here the first instance, and I'm going to zoom out here a little bit so you can go back in time. So we had a prior high, all-time high back over here, but this cycle here, basically we had a basing cycle that started to form, and then we had a cycle peak resistance breakout, which would shift the pattern structure on the intermediate positive, and then it essentially exploded to the upside. I'm sure that the earnings helped with that, and we got this massive rally, taking out that prior all-time high and setting new all-time highs. Once that occurred, and we did set our peak, then we had a pretty sizable pullback, but really it did no damage. It came back, didn't even test the 61.8 on the weekly, and that's where we put our recent cycle low in place here as we now are into this next rising phase in the new cycle. And what we have right now is also our momentum is very positive. And I'm going to pull up our market conditions monitor that can be a great guide and a great help as you are doing your cross-checking on momentum. And you should be able to see here in FSLR, I am looking at the trader type of intermediate. So you can look at intraday, near-term, short-term, but I'm focused on the intermediate. And the system, based on the algorithm that we programmed, looks at our daily momentum conditions for Slim Ribbon Reversal Scout, weekly momentum conditions, and then monthly. And you can see at this time they are all positive, therefore signaling a trade setup condition of very bullish right now in FSLR. So we have momentum that is in alignment with the pattern structure, because this pattern structure was positive. Even though we got that pullback, it did not damage it. So we have momentum, pattern structure positive. We are still fairly early in this, I would call it, or late rising to early peaking phase. So there's plenty of time to go in the cycle on the weekly chart for it to reach the identified projections. Before I get to the projections, let's step over here to the chart on the right, which is the daily chart. And what is very, very clear here with a trained cycle analysis eye is that we have a right-hand translation that is forming. And what that means is it's basically used up most of the cycle timing, and it's forming a peak, which is on the right side of the ideal. So an ideal peak would form, right basically in the center. And this is forming way on the right-hand side. So that is suggesting a positive translation. Therefore, combining all this information in this daily chart, which has a cycle low due here over the next couple of weeks, likely to see a more shallow pullback. The support zones are rising right now. So that's what we're looking for, is if there is the pullback that occurs first, pull back into the short-term support zone. Today we tested that dominant 61.8. You can see that it backed off slightly. So if we get a close above that 61.8 again, that'd be a very strong indication that this dominant larger pattern in terms of the uptrend is resuming itself, and those bulls have really staked a claim in that next rise. So I'm looking at two projections. One projection zone here from 274.55 to about 281, which would get us into that near that 78.6 off this intermediate high low retracement, and then have another opportunity for a more aggressive upside projection zone number 2 here, getting us back testing close to that prior all-time high. Now, I've included in here, and we include our projections, the lines here, and really these are not meant to be taken as exact measurements of the price pattern. What they are meant to be are representations of the expected shape of the price pattern. And what it does is it helps to focus your mind and in a way sort of just screams at you in terms of the shape. So based on the analysis, by having this in front of me, I'm expecting that there's going to be a continued higher high type of pattern. And also that the reality is there will be likely some pullbacks, but the shape of that pullback will be such that there shouldn't be the damage to the pattern structure. What would change this analysis first would be a close below the daily 61.8, which right now is around 225.25, because that would neutralize the pattern that I'm seeing right now and require a reevaluation. Also, I wanted to indicate here that I added in some minor cycles. If you go back, there's some really solid influence that they had been showing over several cycles. And the reason I did that is it helps to give me additional pattern structure context. So you can see that there was a nice minor cycle peak breakout that occurred here in about mid-September, and we've closed multiple times above that, further adding to the evidence that the overall pattern structures are positive. So that's the look at FSLR in terms of a pattern structure bias. And then when you want to look at, once you complete that analysis, it's very important to then determine, do I have a signal? What are my signals that suggest this trade is a go? Obviously, all of this is a moot point unless you have your risk and money management rules in place. But if I look at our multiple time frame grid here, starting from the weekly, moving over to the daily, and the 2 hour, which would be the primary focused time frames, you can see even back here in, if I go back, this was about late July, the slim ribbon PO fired a continuation signal as the overall momentum in the weekly slim ribbon stayed positive throughout that entire pullback. So that's why these indicators are very powerful to give you a feel for those dominant conditions. Moving over into the daily chart, you can actually see yesterday that the slim ribbon PO fired a positive continuation signal, suggesting that this current dominant daily momentum was likely continuing, and we got another upward move today up, as I said, up to that 61.8. So what I'd be watching for is, this one can take off and continue to move, and so you have to pay attention to that. But looking at the 2 hour for opportunities on pullbacks, where you have a pullback and then you have a new resumption, and getting a confirmation of that resumption via the slim ribbon or the reversal scout, or watching the slim ribbon PO. That's my analysis on FSLR.